Imagine boarding a flight today, walking up to the cockpit and asking the captain if you can come inside. 25 years ago, the answer would probably have been a yes. Children would step inside, shake hands with the captain, sit in the pilot's seat, and sometimes even take photographs before the flight. Today, even getting close to that door is almost impossible. So, what changed? The answer completely changed the way airlines think about cockpit safety. And by the end of this video, you will never look at that cockpit door the same way again. Long before reinforced cockpit doors and strict security procedures became the norm, flying was a very different experience. For many airlines around the world, inviting passengers into the cockpit was not unusual at all. In fact, it was considered one of the most memorable parts of the journey, especially for the young kids. For many young travelers, that short visit sparkled a lifelong dream of becoming a pilot. It was not just about seeing buttons and screens. It was about experiencing the heart of the aircrafts where every flight was guided from. Back then, cockpit visits reflected the trust and openness that existed in commercial aviation. But as air travel became more complex, that tradition also carried risks that few people truly understood. And in 1994, one routine flight exposed just how dangerous unrestricted cockpit access could become. On the night of 23rd March 1994, Aeroflot Flight 593 departed from Moscow heading to Hong Kong. On board, an Airbus A310-300 was carrying 63 passengers and total of 12 crew members. The weather was calm, the aircraft was cruising normally, and inside the cockpit, everything appeared exactly as it should. Behind the cockpit door, the crew continued monitoring what appeared to be a completely routine flight. But little did passengers knew, the flight, which was supposed to be a normal flight, within the next few minutes, one seemingly harmless decision inside that cockpit would change everything. The flight was being operated by an experienced three-member flight crew led by Captain Andrew Danilov, First Officer Igor Piskarov, and Relief Captain Yaroslav Kudrinsky. Together, the three pilots had accumulated over 2,500 hours of flying experience extensively on the Airbus A310. Like many pilots at that time, Captain Kudrinsky had brought his family along on the journey. At first, it seemed like nothing more than an innocent family moment. The aircraft continued cruising smoothly at over 30,000 feet. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere remained relaxed, conversations continued, smiles were exchanged, and the children looked around with the same excitement that countless young passengers had experienced before them. Then, Captain Kudrinsky invited his children a little closer to the flight controls. Curious to experience the cockpit from a pilot's perspective, he allowed them to sit in the captain's seat. First his daughter Yana and later his son Eldar. To everyone inside the cockpit, it still felt like an innocent family moment. But without anyone realizing it, the next few seconds would quietly begin one of aviation's most tragic chains of events. As Eldar sat in the captain's seat, curiosity quickly turned into action. Wanting to experience what it felt like to fly an airliner,
Can I turn this?
What?
The wheel?
Yes. If you turn it left, where will the plane go?
Left.
the aircraft continued flying. No warning alarm sounded, and everyone inside the cockpit believed everything was still under control. But without realizing it, that movement partially disconnected the autopilot's control over the aircraft's role. The airplane was no longer correcting itself in the way the crew expected. Since the autopilot continued managing other functions, there was no obvious indication that such a critical change had taken place. Slowly, the aircraft began banking to one side. The turn kept becoming steeper until the bank angle exceeded 45 degrees. As the aircraft drifted farther from its programmed route, the planned course disappeared from the navigation display. Only then did the pilots realize something is seriously wrong. The crew immediately grabbed the controls, but valuable seconds had already been lost. The aircraft entered a rapid descending turn, accelerating to nearly 650 km per hour. Inside the cabin, the increasing G-forces made movement extremely difficult. Captain Kudrinsky, who had briefly stepped away from the pilot's seat, struggled to make his way back to the controls as the aircraft was thrown into violent maneuvers. Desperately trying to recover, First Officer Piskarov pulled back hard on the control column. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. The aircraft's nose finally began to rise, but the recovery came at a cost. Pulled beyond its critical angle, the Airbus started to stall. Losing the airflow needed to keep flying, the aircraft dropped again, descending at nearly 70 meters every second. The crew continued fighting until the very end, but in those final moments, they had lost too much altitude to recover. Within seconds, Aeroflot Flight 593 crashed into the mountains of southern Siberia, sadly leaving no survivors. Following the crash, investigators recovered the aircraft's flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. By carefully reconstructing the final minutes of the flight,
2,500.
the findings revealed that the accident was not caused by a mechanical failure. Instead, a combination of unauthorized cockpit access, partial loss of automatic flight control, and the crew's delayed recognition of the developing situation ultimately led to the disaster. The investigation didn't just explain why Aeroflot Flight 593 crashed it also reminded the aviation industry that even a brief lapse in cockpit discipline could have catastrophic consequences, prompting airlines to further strengthen operational procedures and flight deck safety. Modern aircraft today are equipped with the reinforced cockpit doors that remain locked throughout the flight. Access to the flight deck is electronically controlled from inside the cockpit, and even cabin crew cannot enter without the captain's authorization. Every airline now follows strict standard operating procedures for cockpit access. Because once the aircraft leaves the ground, protecting the flight deck means protecting every passenger on board. Millions of children who once dreamed of sitting beside a pilot can now only look at a locked door. But that small disappointment is the price the industry chose to pay for the safety of hundreds of passengers on board. So the next time you walk past that locked cockpit door, remember it was not always this way. For decades, it welcomed curious passengers, inspired future pilots, and created memories that lasted a lifelong. Now that tradition is gone. But every lesson aviation learned has made flying safer for millions of people around the world. Sometimes the safest door on an aircraft is the one that never opens.